prestigious awards. He is a recipient of IAA Madhav Ajwal Gold Medal 2014 for lifetime contribution to the field of architectural education and community service. He has also won Teachers' Day Award by ISTE RBCE chapter during 2008. The list is very long. I think it is time now to listen to Dr. Anantha Krishna. I welcome you, sir.
Whatever I see here, and the others should be able to see. Like that. So now I have to go like this. Can I start?
Yes.
Hearty welcome to all the participants in this presentation, both offline and online. It is always a pleasure to make a presentation to faculty colleagues because we are all essentially teachers, and in that sense we are always on the same page. At the outset, I would like to thank the director in charge of the Nitte School of Architecture, Planning and Design, Dr. Gayatri, Aditya Madam, and also my faculty colleague, Nandita Madam, both of whom consented for this presentation to happen. When you look at the title of the presentation, you would appreciate that there are three important terms. One is teacher. That is probably the most important term that has been used here. And you know, when we talk about a teacher, we expect certain qualities, certain attitudes for a teacher. To give you a simple example, when we go to a doctor, we expect the doctor to have certain qualities. And all of you know, a doctor always gives a very optimistic view of the prognosis to the patient. And he is expected to be kind. He should have the empathy. He should be willing to listen to the difficulties of the patient, etc. Just like a doctor, other professionals, for example, a lawyer, an engineer, a chartered accountant, all of them have to possess certain attributes. And in that sense, a teacher has to have his own or her own attributes. And that is common to all the disciplines, not only architecture. Any discipline you take, engineering, science, medicine, teacher, commerce, a teacher in any of these disciplines is expected to have certain qualities. So in that sense, architecture teacher also has to have those qualities which are generic in nature, common to a teacher in all disciplines. The second word is architecture. As you are all aware, architecture is a field which has its own niche. In fact, any discipline has its own niche. Nothing special about architecture. But having said that, an architecture teacher should possess a certain unique skill sets, unique to the field of architecture. On the other hand, for example, we always compare ourselves to the engineering teachers. So when we say an engineering teacher, the qualities that are required in an engineering teacher are somewhat different compared to the qualities that we expect in an architecture teacher. That is the second term. And finally, that though it is not in the bold font, India, very important. And I tell you why it is important. Any type of education is strongly linked to the society. Education and society are strongly interlinked. You cannot separate the two. Education in India is rather different, let us say, compared to the education in Sri Lanka, or let us say the education in Cambodia, education in Vietnam, or education in any of the European countries, or in the United States, or in Africa, because the two are so strongly linked. Education is part and parcel of the culture of a society. So therefore, that term India is very critical. That is why I have put it as India. So I am going to look at, in the next hour or so, several issues which are of interest to the architecture teachers in India. Let me start with a basic question, which I mentioned before. Before I proceed, let me say that we can have a question and answer session, let us say for about 15 to 20 minutes after the presentation is finished. So that is the format. So the question I ask is, first of all, what are the basic traits of any teacher? Anybody cannot become a teacher. And you know, just like anybody cannot become a doctor, anybody cannot become an engineer, there are certain attributes and qualities which are special for the teacher, and one must have that attribute. For example, a teacher is expected to be patient with the student. He should be able to clarify the doubts. You cannot be impatient. For that matter, let us take a businessman. The attributes of a businessman are very different from the attributes of a professional teacher. Now, what are these attributes of a teacher? I would think a teacher is expected to be a bookworm. A teacher is expected to read a lot. In fact, I can remember the names of several teachers whom I respect. They're all well-read. So, being well-read in a given field is a very critical requirement for a good teacher, whatever the field may be. And when you say a teacher should be willing to debate, to discuss ideas, willingness to put forward an idea in front of the others, and willing to argue and willing to debate and discuss ideas. In other words, a teacher has to be communicative. A teacher has to be willing to share his ideas with colleagues and then argue. Argument is very much welcome in the case of a teacher. So argument, of course, should be restricted to the field, in our case, to the field of architecture, to the teaching methods, etc. So willingness to debate and discuss. A teacher is expected to be scholarly, and we all know what is the meaning of the word scholarly. That means there has to be a certain depth in the understanding of the subject by the teacher, depth of discussion. I like that term, depth of discussion. In other words, it should not be superficial. So your understanding of any subject has to be in depth, and that of course requires solid reading. Teacher training program, there is that B.Ed course and all that gift of the gap. A teacher is expected to be very articulate. I always think of Vajpayee ji. Of course, we can never measure up to the oratory skills of the great man. But you can always think of such people who had a wonderful command over the language. Gift of the gap, and some people have it, but it can also be cultivated, it can be developed if one puts the effort. And a teacher has to be knowledgeable in the given subject, especially the subject which the person wants to teach. So when you want to teach a subject, there is a certain level of knowledge one has to possess. So I would say these are the attributes of a teacher which is generic in nature. Whatever may be the field, a teacher is expected to have these traits. Now, coming to architecture, a teacher is expected to be first of all professional. And all of you will appreciate what is the meaning of being professional. Any professional, doctor, engineer, lawyer, a professional is a person who has a certain level of competence in his field. He would charge the fees for the services he renders. Competence and the delivery of the goods in time. We all know of these professionals. A carpenter. All of us know what we expect from a carpenter. We pay him the fees, and in return you expect a certain level of service, which is very prompt, efficient, competent. I would say that is the bottom line for a teacher. A teacher has to be first and foremost a professional. When I say professional, there are several comparisons. A competent nurse is a great asset. And many of us, though we may not like to, we would have experienced the stay in hospitals for some reason or the other. And we all know what is a professional service we have to expect from the nurse. Similarly, a teacher, if you don't mind, then I'm tempted to make a lot of jokes. To permit me, I remember an incident which makes this point of being professional. I was in a hospital bed with a serious illness some time back, and it was about 12 o'clock or 12:30 midnight, and I found that there was a tap on the door, and then the nurse entered and switched on the light. Then I was not fully asleep. Then I politely inquired, "What is the matter, madam?" And the answer given was wonderful. I cannot forget it. The answer given was, "I came inside the room just to check whether you are sleeping or not." Look at the level of professionalism. She is not coming even to give me a medicine. She is coming only to inquire whether I am sleeping or not, because I am a patient. Now that is the bottom line. But then, a teacher, you can go to a higher plane than being a professional. Teaching can also be a passion. And all of you know, when you become passionate about anything, your level of involvement in that would be that much higher. And I know of several passionate teachers. Let me not name them, because if I name them, they all come to my mind. If I name them, it may not be well taken. because there is no other interest in that. Passionate. So that means you have to be emotionally attached to the subject which you teach, whatever the subject might be. Then, of course, I do not expect that to happen with a teacher. Obsession. A teacher can become so obsessed. So that is the highest level one can expect to become, to achieve as a teacher. So there are, I would say, 3 levels, and what is expected is that the bottom line should be that of a professional for a teacher. I have, in my long experience of teaching, and most of my time I spent in the classrooms. I never used to sit in my chair as the head of a school. That was my habit. But in the classes, I would make a point to the students all the time. A teacher is more of a student than a student. All of you will appreciate what is the meaning of this. That means I must be all the time learning myself. I must be reading. I must be making notes. In fact, a very simple way to find out whether a teacher is very professional, ask the teacher whether he or she has a small library of her own or his own in the house. So the presence of a small library, personal library, is a good indicator of how much the teacher studies quietly when the teacher is all alone. And I agree, today the situation is slightly changing, because of the internet and all that. Nevertheless, even in this present day, I would like to believe that reading a book has its own advantages. And if you want to get the in-depth knowledge, you have to go back to the books. And there are obviously certain advantages of reading a book compared to reading in the net. And I would like to quote Professor Neelakant Chaya here. And he makes an interesting point. He says teachers as community of learners. All of us teachers, we are on the same page in the sense that we are all collectively learning something or the other. So the important thing is that there has to be communication, there has to be connectivity, there has to be discussion, there has to be interaction among the teachers, because all of us have the same goal. We want to learn architecture, and then whatever we learn, we have to transmit it to the student community. So, and learning is much more effective when we discuss and debate together. So we are a community of learners, and in today's context, technology is helping us. So we can be well connected to people all over the world. Now, this is an important point I would like to talk about. Teaching as the art of storytelling. In my own experience, I am convinced that a teacher has to be a good storyteller. Otherwise, please appreciate how is it that so many students sit together for long hours in a class and listen to the lectures. I know a large part of architectural education is devoted to the design studio. But then there is also a considerable time that is spent in the classrooms. So storytelling, and my own experience is that I have been lecturing so much. My own experience is that you have to keep the students interested in the subject all the time. Otherwise, what the students would say, to permit me to say that, that is the kind of, I am using Kannada, of course, that is the language which I am used to. You know what I mean by that? And there is another point, and that is, I have heard this, you also would have heard this on several occasions. Some teachers would come and tell you, this is a dry subject. So several places where I have visited schools, somebody would say it's a dry subject. I tell them very instantaneous, like there is nothing like a dry subject or a wet subject. Any subject is dry or wet depending on what you make out of it. So the ability to make a subject interesting, there are so many tricks. I don't think this is the forum to talk about the art of storytelling. That is a thing by itself, but a teacher should have that ability to make things lively and interesting in the class so that the student can sit for hours and hours and listen to you and learn the subject. This is a philosophical question I would like to raise with our teachers. And the philosophical question is the teacher a lamp or is the teacher a mirror? And all of us will agree, teachers will basically act as mirrors. Good mirror. So we all know what is a good mirror. So we get a true reflection of ourselves in the mirror. In other words, you should be able to faithfully reflect what is already there as a body of knowledge in the field you have to reflect it. That is the bottom line. But there is a scope to raise the bar and become a lamp. And when I say a lamp is a source of light. Now, are you able to raise to the level of being a leading light and then leading the student community, providing that new knowledge? So the ability of the teacher to become a lamp is a great challenge. And then that should be the ideal for any teacher, especially in the field of architecture. My own experience is that the students, any type of students, you can expect them to listen to you. Whatever you say, they will listen, provided you first of all win their hearts and minds. And you know what I am meaning by that. How do you win their minds? You win their minds by your competence in your chosen field of specialization. The moment they know that you have got a grip on the subject and you are knowledgeable and you are well read, you know what you are teaching, then you are able to win their minds. But that is not enough. How do you win their hearts? You will be able to win their hearts when they look, when they observe you all the time. And each and every action of yours. And you know, when you are a teacher, you deal with the students in very different situations. Each and every situation, they will observe your behavior. And if your behavior is such that it is unbiased, it is always taken in good faith, in the best interest of the student, you are able to win their hearts as well. And I can tell you from experience, the moment you win the hearts and minds of students, they will become like putty. Whatever you say, they will obey. That is what I have observed. Whatever you say, that will be the law. There is absolutely no problem. So that is what is very critical. And it is always easier said than done. And it takes a lot of time to win the hearts and minds of students. And all of you will agree, the most important requirement of any teacher is to motivate and inspire the students. That is the critical thing which is expected of a teacher. Inspire. And I'll give you one example, because examples are very much necessary. I remember the days when there would be the annual exhibition of the college where I was working. Every year we would do an annual exhibition. And you know, the student community, most of the work had to be done by the students, so many guest speakers, so much of display area, this, that, so many things. They would all have to be done by the students basically. And as usual, let us say 15 days before the start of the exhibition, nothing much would have been done. And I would be worried. So what I would do, I would take them to the OAT and then give them a pep talk. Because you see, I had nothing to offer them in real terms. I was not able to give them money, I was not able to give them fame, name, nothing. I had nothing to offer in return to their hard work for the exhibition. But in spite of that problem, I had to convince them that it is in their best interest, it is their moral duty to do whatever is required to put up a good exhibition. And I remember every time the exhibition happened, the same story repeated. I had to go to the open air theater, collect all the students and stand and talk. I didn't even have a mic. I had to shout. So motivate and inspire, that is a special quality which is required for any teacher of architecture. This is well known, it is a cliche, leading by example. There is nothing else which is a substitute. No substitute for leadership by example. And this is not only true in the case of students, but in general life as well. And I always tell students and tell teachers, whoever is willing to listen to me, that do not judge a person by what that person tells you. Sorry, Puri. Always observe the person's actions. Actions are more truly reflective of the mind of the person, not what the person says. You know, it's so easy to talk anything. But the point is, what do you do all the time? So students will observe you all the time. What is your action? What do you do from morning till evening when you are in the school? What are you doing? Are you engrossed in your work all the time? And here I would like to say, from my experience, that students are like bogies, teachers are like engines. The engines will have to pull the bogies, not the other way around. The bogies are bogies. So how to pull the bogies? You require the engine. The teacher has to do the job of the engine. I told you earlier, if you are able to win the minds and hearts of students, then you can become an engine. So they will listen to you. You can do whatever with them and they will obey you. Whatever you say, they will obey. Whatever you say is the final order. They will be willing to do whatever you say, provided you win their hearts and minds. In other words, teachers have to aspire to become like engines. I will not say much about this because I am myself, I'm sorry to say that I am rather weak in this area. But whether I am weak or not is secondary. That is my problem. Today, the impact of technology on teaching, I am very happy to see young people, very proficient, and I have told them also. Many of my young teachers have told them, I really appreciate your ability, especially with respect to soft skills. And I wish I were as good as you are, but I am not. And you know the dramatic transformations that have taken place because of technology. Technology is a very powerful force. Unless you keep pace with it, you will be left behind. Nobody can defeat technology. It is all powerful. And that applies to the field of teaching as well. And I am very glad that several young teachers, they are excellent in this area, and I appreciate that. In fact, you know, in the case of keeping up with technology, the oldies have got problems. The youngsters have no problem. When we talk about architecture schools, and when we when architecture schools are discussed in the profession, if they are discussed by the architects, there is one fine distinction which is not made by any of the parties. What is that? Architecture, of course, is a profession. Yes. The students will have to join the profession. Yes. But we should also not forget that architecture is a discipline today. We should differentiate between a discipline and a profession. Discipline means a serious study of the subject in the classrooms. This discipline. We make a serious study of chemistry, physics, astronomy, geology, etc. Similarly, architecture today, the fact that architecture is part of university system of education means architecture is recognized as a discipline. It is not only a profession. You will hear so many things from people. Profession, 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 jobs, jobs. All that is correct. But in that respect, if you forget the fact that architecture is also a discipline and there is a certain body of knowledge which is already built into it, and it is the job of the schools to be focused on the knowledge part of architecture, we are making a mistake. Thirst for knowledge. That is a very important requirement for a teacher. And I remember, I don't want to name, because naming is always a problematic, especially for me. A vice chancellor, he was addressing a group of teachers, and the idea of calling that meeting was to encourage the faculty members to do their PhD. That was the context. And in that context, he made an interesting point. He used this terminology. You people should develop a thirst for knowledge. Of course, very nicely said, no doubt about it. In the true spirit, thirst for knowledge is a wonderful thing. That is a quality which is required for a teacher. All the time we have to learn. Constantly a teacher has to strive to obtain that knowledge in the field. And unfortunately, today there is so much of discussion about the profession, how do you train them, what is that, that term, so much used, industry ready, jobs, all that is fine. I know jobs are very important for all of us, no doubt. But then in that hurry, let us not forget that this is also a discipline. Don't we seriously study other subjects, astronomy? Will anybody blame you that you are studying astronomy? Similarly, if I study architecture, what is wrong in that? So the willingness to study architecture in depth, serious study, is the job of the teacher. Because you can't expect professionals to do it. And today, you see, I will come to the point later. Today, there has been a tremendous change in the field of architecture and in the field of course, everything changes. Nothing special about architecture. But the implication of that for architecture teachers is that architecture teachers cannot be generalists, sari puri. We cannot, today the development of knowledge has been so specialized. You should select your niche area and then become strong in that. And I am glad to tell you all this is only from experience. And people who know me as colleagues, they know what I am talking. I will give you a simple example to make my point. I was very harsh probably. I will tell you one real incident. I will not reveal you the names. Real incident, real person, very, very nice gentleman. I brought him as a teacher. And people know that I do cherry picking. People know cherry picking. And some strange ideas are there. I don't know. Please permit me to say that these things I have said in public, sometimes people don't like it. That is my problem. In one public meeting where there were about 2,000 students and teachers and parents, I said, you know how I pick my teachers. And I told them about the Ramayana, this character of Sabari. Sabari loved Rama so much. She was totally devoted to Rama. And because of that strong devotion, she wanted to offer fruits to Rama. And when she wanted to offer the fruits, she was very careful that only the best fruits are selected. So she would first bite a fruit, and only if the fruit were really good, that would be offered to Rama. That was the devotion of Sabari to Rama. Then when I made this point, then I asked the audience, in a lighter vein, who is Rama? Who is Sabari? And who are the fruits? Of course, it was very clear. Rama represents the student community. Sabari, you can guess yourself who was Sabari. And who are the fruits? The fruits are the teachers. So you pick the best teachers and then provide those fruits to the students so they get the best out of the system. So I think that conveys the point, how important it is that the teachers do their job very well. And today, the specialization has become so critical. And I will tell you one real example. I think I just deviated, please excuse me. One teacher who worked with me for about 10 years, a wonderful person. Of course, I did cherry picking, and people know what I am talking. I will not go into the details. People know it. I did all my homework. And I have a very strange idea about interviewing teachers. Please permit me to say that I do not believe in any interviews of any teachers. I don't have any respect for that. I would like to interview the teacher in that fellow's absence. I don't have to look at the teacher at all. I will interview the teacher, find out about the qualities, the competence levels of the teacher in that person's absence. Now let me not go into it. This is not the right place. Now this gentleman, I selected him, and I observed his abilities as the principal. I told you about the fruits. Fruits will have to be good before they are offered to the students. I realized that this gentleman, he has the experience of architectural design because he was doing that work for a famous organization. Let us not go into it. But I realized that his skills are good in building construction. That fellow is a person who spends time on the site, who supervises, good in it. So what I did, I purposely put him on to the field of the teaching of building construction. And believe it or not, that teacher is a nice fellow. He would politely scold me. What, sir? You are not giving me architectural design to teach. I would like to teach architectural design, but you are giving me building construction. A very good friend of mine. What do I do? Friendship will not have. Friendship is friendship, but professionalism is professionalism. We cannot mix the two. That is not going to be good for the profession. So I would cajole him. I would, politely submit to him that it is better if he does building construction. And my action was correct, but because he became a very good teacher of building construction. He is a very good teacher. He is there. Even today he teaches building construction, where it doesn't matter. And I recommended this gentleman to a college for the purpose of teaching building construction. I was very specific. So the point is, who gets the benefit out of this specialization? The student community. Similarly, whatever subject you want to teach, you must become a specialist. And suppose you want to teach history and theory, I will expect the moon. You must be a bookworm. I pointed out those requirements. Suppose you want to teach professional practice, it is another ballgame. This is another basic thing. Professional practice can be taught only if you run a practice. So I ensured that the person who has got the experience of running a practice, that person taught the subject. And that worked very well because he was able to give the real examples of what really happened. See, the IIA guideline will say, the COA guideline is there, but the real situation is there. Real situation may be different. What has really happened, and it may not be the same in all cases. So one should know what happens in the reality, and that is what we are expected to impart to the student community. I'm not going to give you more examples because there is lack of time. But the point I am making here, humble point, is each subject one has to specialize and one has to decide what is the right area where one has the strength to specialize. See, all of us, we have our own limitations. We cannot teach all the courses at the same level of efficiency and competence. So one has to make a choice. And today that is the requirement. And please look at the wonderful advancements made in other fields. Please look at the medical field. I always tell my people, look at the medical field. Suppose you as patients, what do we do? When we have a lung problem, where do we go? We go to the pulmonologist. We don't go to some eye specialist. When there is a problem with the bones, you go to the orthopedic person. I went there just 15 days back. Why do you go to the specialist in the medical field? Why not in the architecture field? So the benefit of specialization goes to the customer. In our case, if we specialize, we have an in-depth understanding of a certain area of architecture, the benefits will go to the student. That is the ultimate purpose. And today the situation has arisen where we cannot be specialists in all the fields. Now I will ask a very rather different question. What are the sources of knowledge for a teacher? See, a teacher is also a learner. And before I teach a subject, I have to learn. So the question I am asking is, how do I learn? From where will I get my knowledge? I would say, today, in the present day situation, there are three sources of knowledge for a teacher in architecture. One is, of course, the traditional method. You read. When Kannada proverb is there, my friend, good friend teases me, he says, that is not the right proverb, but I will still quote it. No mistakes, no offense to anyone. Odi marulada kucha batta. You read, you are completely immersed, you are gone. Reading, reflecting, culling. That is what represents solid, heavy reading. That is one source of knowledge. You read, you understand, you digest, you reflect, you question, you compare the ideas of different authors, then you take a call. That is one source from which I will get knowledge and I will be able to teach. The second source is the professional experience. A person is in real-time practice. Practice is also learning, no doubt about it. When I am in practice, I learn. To take the case of a doctor, if that fellow has served as a doctor for 2 years, has he not learned? It is a mistake, to my mind, please excuse me, to think that only degrees are learning. Sorry, Puri. It is not just degrees. You learn all the time. In a good professional setup, you learn. You learn a lot. So, That is a very important source for knowledge for a teacher. You practice, and several people, the one leg will be in practice, one leg will be in teaching, and all that. There are several such people, all kinds of problems, controversies. I am not interested in all those things. My humble point is that that fellow's source of knowledge is coming from the profession. I don't worry about other things. The wonderful source of knowledge which you can use to teach the students. And nowadays, there is a third source, research. There is a strong interest in research, whatever it is, the UGC, whatever it is, PhD, and what has happened to the PhD now. The universities will treat any person who doesn't have a PhD as a pariah. And I know the experience of VTU. The Vice Chancellor would ask me, can you kindly recommend a person for the chairman of board of examinations? I said, okay, sir, I will give you 3-4 people's name, you select. But one condition, I want all of them to be PhD. Then I would scratch my head. But a very strange experience, I will tell you. I gave a name, and then the Vice Chancellor himself said, please suggest people, I don't mind even if he is not a PhD. No, that is another story. No, let me not go into it. So research, there is a lot of work done in the area of research. You have got that much more journals, articles. Even in the Indian case, there is a plenty of reports. So research, which provides new knowledge, which provides additional knowledge to architecture, is another source. So a teacher has to depend on these sources for teaching. There is no other way. Now, many of you would have heard about this statement, especially made by architects. Architecture cannot be taught. Sorry, Puri. I will give you counterpoints why this is mistaken. This point was there in the minds of architects long back. Now things have changed dramatically. I will give you solid reasons why you can contest this attitude of many architects. Architecture cannot be taught. Straight away I will tell you, you ask a counter question to the architect who talks like this, then why is it that you are sending your son to a school of architecture? Don't send your son, because without the BR degree you cannot become an architect. And there are 450 schools of architecture in India. All the schools are teaching architecture. Then if you come and tell us architecture cannot be done, sorry, Puri, utamado, eat. But I will give you another very strong reason, highly technical reason, why it is totally mistaken. What they actually mean when they say architecture cannot be taught, they really what they have in mind is design cannot be taught. That is also incorrect. Why? Today, things have changed. We have got what is called the design pedagogy. What is design pedagogy? Pedagogy means the methods of teaching. So when you talk about the methods of teaching design, then that question is answered. Architecture can be taught. Otherwise, why do we have pedagogical issues in design? So today, there is a lot of work on the table. One has to become aware, familiar and teach. Learning objectives, all of you are aware now, outcome-based education is coming to architecture also. One FDP is going to be held, and I asked them to give me the topics, and a lot of topics on outcome-based education. Program objective, course objective, they want to conduct. Learning objectives, very highly sensible. The whole problem is this kind of a doubt arises in the minds of people simply because they are not keeping with the times. Today, outcome-based education, first you have to define at the end of the B architecture course what are the skill sets a graduate has to possess. You decide that. Let the academicians and the professionals sit together and decide what they want from a fresh PR. The moment they decide, they have to work backwards and find out what is it that has to be learned for the 5 years so that they get all the skills. So the one has to work backward. And then you decide what is it that you teach each year, what is the gradation. So each skill set you have put up has to be imparted. So you work backwards. First you define the skill sets. Then you work backwards to arrive at the courses which you want to teach so that those skill sets are imparted. So therefore, pedagogical issues of design, design also can be taught, and there are methodologies for that. And I myself was a witness to those methodologies in my own school, and I am familiar with that. These are all vertical integration of the studios. How do you achieve it? What is the gradation? What is the logic? That has to be clearly spelled out. Horizontal integration of the knowledge from other courses into design. How do you ensure that? How do you set the problems? How do you organize the studio? Who are all going to be there? And people are aware what of possibilities exist in terms of pedagogy. For example, function introduced into form. Especially in the second year of the architecture program in architectural design, all of us will break our head. Students, so they have learned basic design, but nothing of that is getting translated into architectural design. Hot put has no meaning. It is your job to do that. You cannot beat the students and they don't know how to do it. So how do you do? That is pedagogy. What is that pedagogy that's been done? So at the starting point of, let us say, the third semester, what has been done? The students have been encouraged to arrive at a form first, pure composition of three-dimensional objects. Conditions would be given. I will not go into the details. They did that. They arrived at a suitable composition of three-dimensional forms. At some stage, it was firmed up, and after that was finished, the function was introduced. I can remember that house at 3 levels, and the students were asked to introduce or retrofit, if you want, these functions into that form without making radical alterations to the form. So I remember that experiment, wonderful. So every student was able to come out with a design which was highly aesthetic in nature. So it has to do with pedagogy. So when you talk about the pedagogy of design, what do you mean by saying architecture cannot be taught or design cannot be taught? Sorry. Influence of site and design. I'm giving you just some samples to make the point. So many things have been done. There are several colleges which have done. It is only a question of getting to know what they have done and getting to introduce that in one's own school. I remember this experiment, very successful. Okay, simply if you say that the influence of site and design, site everybody knows, but how do you get it done from the student community? The problem was given. The problem was the design of a museum. The class was divided into 2 parts, 20 each. Part A and Part B. Part B and Part A had the same brief, but the site for Part A was outside the city. The site for Part B was inside the city, the clutter of the city, lot of restrictions, lot of traffic. So one batch had a very complex and cluttered site. Another batch had a nice site outskirts, in the outskirts. And then the initial design, when it was developed, they were all put up. On one side, you had the work of batch A, on the opposite side, the work of batch B. Problem was the same. Sites were very different, and the solutions were also different. So the students are learning because of your pedagogy, the influence of site and design. So the point here is pedagogy today has advanced. Pedagogy means teaching method. Teaching method of design is advanced. One has to get to know of it and implement it. So that is the skill of the design teacher. So teaching skills are required. Let me very briefly say what has changed dramatically in the last 75 years after independence. The scenario has been totally changed in the field of architectural education. What was it before? And many senior people, they are aware of it. Less schools, hardly any school. I remember those days. Karnataka had just one school for a long time. Now you know, I don't have to say that. How many schools are there in Karnataka? Same thing with India. Same thing with Kerala. Kerala I remember very well. I only knew about that these 3 schools were there. I can remember those. CET, Trivandrum. Along then Kollam there is one college, TKM. Then there used to be this NIT Calicut, finished. Today how many schools are there? Less teachers. In fact, there was no concept of a full-time teacher at all. All teachers used to have a practice and they will visit and do part-time. That was the arrangement. There was no concept of a full-time teachers. People like us were not there. Kya hai? Very few magazines. Terrible. Nothing was there. Books also were not available. Only this Bannister Fletcher. Today Bannister Fletcher has lost its significance. There is so much of material available. Students finish B.Arch and join the practice. That's all. Straightforward. Architects start part-time. I don't know whether I can tell the names. Of course, Percy Thacker, old man will come and speak, take professional practice. Divakar, our own Shankar Kanade used to teach, and we all know he is a very good practitioner as well. So that was the situation. Architects start part-time. No concept of full-time teacher. Teaching was extension of practice. So whatever the practice was going on in the field, that was extended in the studio. Perfect harmony between teaching and practice. There was total harmony. Whatever the teachers, whatever the architects practiced, they taught. Whatever they learnt, they taught in the studio. Students learnt whatever from their teachers, who were all basically architects. Then after 5 years, they quietly joined their offices. That was the scene. Today what is the scene? Completely changed. Full-time teachers. More schools. Most schools. 450, whatever. Students, teachers, all over the place. Influence of research was never there. Magazines. People are there today to write. And I will tell you a joke if you do not mind. In the old days, not now. If some architecture teacher or architect wrote something in a newspaper or something, you know what the other colleagues would do? In Kannada, they would make a joke. They would ask this fellow whether he has no job. That means the fellow who has no job only will write. Today things have changed. That was the attitude. For a long time, they thought this writing and all was alien to architecture. That means if you don't get any job, you do it. Time pass. Influence of research magazines. The research concept was non-existent. Zero. Opinions. Everybody would fight. I am right, you are right. So they would just talk about their opinions, and there was no way to know who is right, who is wrong. That was the situation. Today schools have independent existence. See, today, of course, also you may say you have to train the students to fit into the practice. But today, good schools, they can stand on their own. I don't want to name names here. I know a school in India wherein they are very strong. They are independently powerful. And I know that several architects would be in a queue. For what purpose? Because visiting there. And how will they choose the visiting person? They will ask that architect, okay, take a course. This fellow will take a course. After that, depending on his performance, they will say, they will decide whether to continue that fellow or not to continue. So you know what is the strength of the school. So schools have to aspire to become strong, not weak. And students today, you know what has happened to the employment. Earlier, out of 40 students, let us say about 15 to 20 students would go to the profession. Today that number has changed. Today only out of 40, 78 will go into the profession. Rest all will deviate to do other things. So there is a tremendous change in the pattern of employment for BR graduates. You got options. Teaching is an option. You know that. And several MR courses. I remember there was hardly any MR course here in Karnataka. I remember all those days. Today there are, Bangalore itself, I counted the other day, 10 colleges are giving MR. Because they all want to become teachers. Research, computers, digital. Schools as counterweight to practice. So that concept we have not been able to achieve. See, there is the practice. There is the school. Practice is all powerful. School is weak. Sorry, Puri. That is the situation today. Schools are very weak. But they have to become strong. They should do their job so efficiently that the practitioners would love to come and teach them. Like I mentioned to you about colleges in India. People are wanting to go and join that college, but it is not easy. Look at that scenario. Question and criticize practice. That we have never done. See, a school's job is to raise above all these mundane things of teaching and become strong so that they question what happens in the practice. I'll give you an example. And fortunately, now that kind of an approach is coming in. And in fact, the Council of Architecture is preparing the syllabus for a 12-week training program for the young teachers. And one of the points is about this. For example, suppose there is already a building which is designed by X, Y or Z. Suppose you ask a student to assume that the building doesn't exist and you give an alternative design to that, what is already existing. And I'll give you an example, real example in Bangalore. You know that Vikas Sauda is there. Vikas Sauda is a mere copy of that Vivan Sauda. Chitrana. You can give an alternative design, and there is a strong argument why Vikas Sauda is not justified in terms of design. Because Vikas Sauda came up recently, 20 years ago, let us say. Situation has changed in Karnataka. It's a public building. It has to express the aspirations of the people of Karnataka today, not the people of Karnataka in the 1950s. It is the revivalism. They were all very much against the British after independence, and they wanted a building which they could call their own. In that situation, Vivan Sauda was designed, quite rightly. Revivalist movement. What is the point in copying that today? When Karnataka, especially Bangalore, is a silicon city. So the point here is, so the ability of the school to question and criticize practice is something which the school has to aim at. Here the teachers will have to play a very important role. That means our level of performance as a school has to go much further. So before I conclude, I would like to make a point. and I have indirectly mentioned about it. Today, the situation, if you look at the comparison between the teaching and practice of architecture, it is heavily one-sided. We all get practitioners into the schools, which is good. But what is the other way? Have you ever seen teachers being invited by the professionals for anything? So today the situation is not on the side of the teachers. The balance, the relative balance is in favor of the architect. The main reason is that we have not risen up to that level where we can be a counterweight to the practice and where we can offer something substantial to the practice. A practitioner will respect the teacher if the teacher gives back something in return. What is it that we are giving back to the practice? And you know what is happening now? The architects will come to the school only when their children are to be educated. They come only for that. Sorry, that is not enough. For example, the PhDs we are producing, if we are able to come out with the PhDs which actually are useful to the professionals in some way, the whole thing will change. Thank you very much.
Questions? Any questions are welcome. We can ask questions to sir. Please.
Please feel free to ask any questions with respect to what has been presented.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Ramaraj here. May I ask a question? Is it audible, sir? Sir, is it audible?
Yes, sir.
We are not able to hear
Sir,
you.
you're not audible.
Is it audible now? Okay, I will type the question, sir. I'll type it.
Yes,
Yeah, please, sir. Once again.
Please feel free to ask any questions.
Sir, is it audible now?
Yes, please.
Sir, thank you. It was wonderful to listen to you, sir. This is Ramaraju. Sir, what should be the approach in teaching students at the master's level, sir? Master's level.
What is the approach to the teaching at master's level? There is a very clear difference made by Linda Groth, who has written that book on architectural research methods. She makes a fine distinction among the BR courses, the MR courses, and the PhD courses. And what she says, I think, answers your question. In philosophical terms, the answer is, at the BR level, there is a lot of design and less of research, least research. At the MR level, the research component increases and the design component decreases. And finally, at the PhD level, the research component increases so much, the design component is negligible. So that is the kind of an equation we have among the three different courses. So if you agree to this logic, I would think it is a very good way of differentiating among the courses, especially in your case, you're talking about BArch and MArch. At the MArch level, the emphasis will have to be more on research compared to what is done at the BArch level. When I say more on research, what it means is the collection of primary data, the analysis of the primary data, the analysis of data. So the rigor which you have for the collection of data and for the analysis of data will have to be much higher in the master's level courses compared to what is done in the BArch courses. In the BArch courses, the emphasis is quite rightly very much on the design component. At the MArch courses, the emphasis should be more on the analysis of the data that is collected, the different techniques of analyzing data, the methods by which you arrive at the conclusions from the serious study of the data. Okay, the design component becomes somewhat less. That is one thing. That is one dimension. Another dimension is MArch is always about the specialization. Specialization, whether it is interior design or urban design or landscape design or product design, whatever it is specialization. So the focus should be on the given specialization in a given MArch program. And another point I would like to say about the difference between the BArch and the MArch teaching methodologies is at the BArch level, the students most of the time are taught. So many things are taught and imparted. At the MArch level, the focus can shift to discussion-based learning, collective learning. So the discussion method is more appropriate at the MArch level rather than at the BArch level. So I think these are the points that matter at the MArch level. Have I answered your question?
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Any more questions?
Any other question, please? You're welcome to ask on any aspect.
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Please, sir.
Myself, Amit Prasadi, professor from GIT College, Belgaum.
Yes, sir.
Sir, my question is that schools that are imparting architectural education,
Yes.
do they really need to, do they need to have some sort of a thought process? I mean, one can recognize that what emphasis they want to really have while
Correct.
imparting education
Yes.
in the field of design.
Yes.
So today we see that many schools in general
Yes.
are not having this kind of emphasis, like a specific school of thought.
Correct.
So can you please reflect upon this, key what exactly is missing and how one can build upon this idea?
It is a good question. The answer is a little complex. It is always desirable that a school of architecture has a certain ideology or a certain emphasis, and it takes the school in that direction. So the problem here is I'll give you the example. Suppose a school wants to, let us say, focus on sustainability as a major emphasis in that school. Now, to achieve that, you require a number of conditions. It is much easier stated than achieved. What is required? What is required is first you put up your ideology. That means the senior teachers sit together and make that ideology for the school. I am only giving the example. There can be several other ideologies. Sustainability in design is one ideology which is quite sensible to my mind. But what is required to be done is very tough. What is required to be done? You have to collect a pool of people, whether they are full-time or visiting or whatever, all of them should relate to that ideology.
Exactly.
So collecting a pool of people who all resonate to that ideology is the first step. And then if you are able to build it up over time, the students who join your school will also be such students who are interested in that emphasis. So it is the collective effort of the faculty and the student community to bring the direction to the school. Here I am talking about sustainability in design. Now, to go to that level, you have to first of all sort out your immediate issues. You have to be a stable school. Your faculty will have to be there. At least, there should not be a very high attrition rate. People come and go. You can't do this. Okay, you have to be in a position to attract all these people in different parts of the country to come to your school, which is a Herculean task. So the kind of studios that you set up for the students will all have that focus. So it is possible and it is desirable. The point is, to reach that stage, you must sort out the basic issues first of all. I mean, what I mean by basic issues, there must be a good demand for your school. You must be getting sufficient students. You should have the faculty, build the faculty, and your management should be willing to support you with respect to this ideology. And many times there will be conflicts. For example, the management will say, you first fill up this 40 or 80, then we will talk. What are you going to do? When you select the faculty, you have to be very meticulous in getting the specialists on board, which is again difficult. So my humble point is that it is a very desirable situation. But to go to that level, you must overcome the basic problems of the school first and become stable. I don't want to name any names. Names will create problems. So there are schools like that which are stable. For example, there is one school which even today argues that architecture is a science. Architecture is science and technology. So whether you agree with it or not, they are doing like that. Now, whether they are successful or not, let me not say anything. But they have got some ideology and they want to follow it. And there are some reasons for it. They are part of a strong technology-oriented institution. So the background is heavy technology is there, very strong. So they also are influenced by that. And I will tell you a very interesting point about that school. When architecture was introduced in that place, people questioned, it's at a high level. Why are you introducing architecture in a technology-dominated institution? And one answer was wonderful. The wonderful answer was that we want technology to become humane. That is why we are putting architecture here. That's a wonderful answer. But unfortunately, the reality is otherwise. Instead of that happening, what is happening is the architecture is so much influenced by technology, they even openly say, there are several seminars I have attended, they openly stand up and say, architecture is a science. They openly say. architecture is a science. Okay, that is because of the background influence of technology. But nevertheless, whatever you can debate that, the ideologies can be disputed and debated, welcome. So, but at least they have got an ideology, like what you have said. They follow it. Similarly, there are several ideologies that are possible, but to reach there is a lot of effort. Now, that is the million-dollar question. And the humdrum or the difficulties that we face in running a good school, I don't have to explain. So many colleges will not be able to go to that level at all. But it is a sensible thing to do, quite sensible. That means your strength is going up and up. You are strong, so you can stick on to an ideal. That requires strength. I hope I have answered, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes.
Excuse me, sir. Very good afternoon.
Yes, please.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
Firstly, it was a brilliant presentation in the afternoon. A lot of wisdom bites.
Yes.
I just have a very small question.
Yes.
With a lot of syllabus, strict syllabus, a number of hours that we have to finish, and all of this that we have.
Yes.
How important it is for us to bring in certain amount of philosophy into our design classes, or let's say history of architecture classes, or let's say even if theory of architecture classes. Let's say if we have to bring in G.D. Krishnamurti, or I'm just bringing random names right now. Let's say may it be G.D. Krishnamurti or K.B. Jinhan, or Plato for that matter. Just in terms of, let's say, speaking about experience, or let's say, speaking about architecture or urban design or all of these, when we are trying to create environments, speaking about experience, how to create environments, because all of these, philosophers have spoken about experience and creating experiences in beautiful ways. So, how important is it to speak about all of these philosophers and their writings? Or will this deviate? Is what is my question. I don't know. What's your take on this, sir?
Again, it is a very good question. Your question, please correct me if I understand it correctly. Your question is the ability of the school to discuss about the philosophies of great philosophers and the impact of what on architecture. Is that the question?
Yes. Exactly, sir. Exactly.
Yes. Now, you may be aware that there is a lot of interest in philosophy when it comes to architecture and architects. Some of the most well-known architects of the world, they have borrowed ideas from philosophers, and they are influenced by philosophers, and some of them are able to even bring the implications of that learning from the philosophers onto their design. Philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, he was the author of nihilism. Friedrich Nietzsche, or to give you a very well-known example, you take the case of deconstruction, which had a tremendous influence created by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida, and how that idea of deconstruction, which started in philosophy and in literature, it was borrowed by the architects, and deconstruction itself became a very strong movement in architecture, and it was a popular movement. popular movement, deconstruction. So the origin of that goes to the philosophy and literature. And architects borrowed that. There are several architects who have done that type of work. So there is an influence, but what is happening is, if you take the case of Bernard Schumi, he again referred to philosophy. If you look at his works, again there is a deconstruction there. See, you subvert you subvert what is there already. You subvert it. And in fact, you reverse the situation. We all think the function comes first and then the form will have to fit into the function. See, the form is subservient to function. All of us, in the reality, that is what happens. Function is the predominant thing. But, there are people who have done the opposite also. Form first. Who cares for function? That approach has also happened. And they have been influenced by the philosophers. But I would like to say, my own view is that such ideologies of influence from philosophers may work in certain situations where my own understanding is it can work well where the minimum needs of people are thoroughly satisfied and they have that luxury and the freedom to experiment and try all this. But in a country like India, to my mind, you cannot practice that in a large scale. Maybe you can still practice it in isolated situations where the client is willing to go with you, with your ideas, because they are borrowed on the philosophical issues. But in a situation where there is a dearth of resources, I'll give you one simple example to make my point. No other reason. Why should my staircase go to anywhere? Okay? Now, can you say that here in India? Is it possible? Suppose I make a statement like that. I don't think anybody will take me seriously here. Why should my staircase go to anywhere? So the point here is, the simple point is that these kinds of philosophical constructs, experiments are possible in certain situations. For example, there have been serious attempts by architects. Let me not name them. Can you believe it? The attempt is, through the architecture, you change the way of life. Ulta karo. That means your architecture will change the way you live. Now, the point is it possible? You have to ask the question. See, suppose I talk like that in a housing context in India, middle income or even high income, it may not be well received. It is possible probably in the developed countries where there is so much of wealth, you do all this. You say, my architecture will change the way you live. Okay, looks very nice. But will the client accept it? So there are a lot of... But the point, your point is correct. In recent terms, there has been a lot of influence of philosophers on the thinking of architects. Have I attempted to answer your question, sir?
Of course, yes, sir. Of course, yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any more questions, sir?
Please.
Sir, good afternoon. Subodh Khandekar here.
Yes.
Good to hear you, sir. Felt like sitting in your class again after a long time.
Oh, very nice. Same here.
I have one quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
All this while we heard you telling about what teachers should be doing.
Okay.
I would like to know, as a practitioner,
Yes.
what would your advice be if I was interested in getting into teaching?
In getting into?
Teaching.
Okay. Quite all right. There is a practitioner. I know you are a practitioner, and you are interested in teaching. That is a very good thing. As far as the School of Architecture is concerned, it would be very, very nice. And I will tell you something. I don't know how to put it. Suppose you have done your BR. I'll put it as pleasantly as possible. It's only ideas. There is no other intent in all this. I will answer your question in this manner. I got your point. And in fact, suppose a person, I have said this openly, not to the liking of several people. Suppose there is a fresh BR. And let us say that fresh BR joins a good architectural firm. Good is important. Gets all the experience, not only in design but other aspects, other things also in the profession. A good firm. So he has a BR and 5 years he has worked with a good architectural firm. I would any day prefer that fellow as a teacher. And I have done it in reality. And I would also encourage that person to have a part-time practice. And I have done it. I will not go into details. I have allowed that. The reason is, you don't have to worry at all. If you want to join teaching, it is good. The point is, you have certain skills which you have learned in your practice. And the skills are of several varieties. First of all, design skills. Then you have executed buildings. You know the nuts and bolts of putting up a building. A building is not only design, it has to be executed. Finally, you have to deliver the product to the client. It is not easy. And all that tremendous skills you have acquired. So what you need to do is, you are welcome to join teaching. And when you come and teach, please select those areas which are of where you are strong. And I would say, if you have got sufficient practice, you must be strong in building construction. You must be strong in design. I mean, I'm not saying it's automatic, but it is left to you. Okay? And you may also be good in services. I'm not saying everybody will be good. So you choose those areas where your expertise is going to be directly beneficial to the student community. No problem with that. But only thing is, according to the present rules, you can become an assistant professor with a BArch degree. Okay, if you don't mind that, you are most welcome. Because your expertise is very valuable in the studios and in certain areas. Because we should always think what the teacher is having to offer. And I know that a person with let us say 10 years of practice has certain things to offer. And I would want the teacher to look at those courses and help the students, because he is strong in that area. So there is no issue about that. You don't have to do anything extraordinary. You don't break your head, because what you have learned, you have learned. And I told you earlier that a person who works in practice learns every day. I do not believe that a degree means learning. I do not believe in it. I mean, that is my view, and people can contest that. I do not believe in it. But then whatever legal rules are there, you have to follow. What can I do? The learning happens in practice. Many times it happens in a more rigorous manner than what happens in teaching. So I would say it is a welcome thing if somebody with good professional experience wants to join teaching. And within, we have to examine, assistant professor, you are eligible full time. Otherwise, there are several options. You can become a visiting person. You know, so many people are involved in a visiting mode. That is also a possibility. Now there is another position, tenure, but there also the qualifications matter. So if it is only a BR, then assistant professor, you can easily get an employment, and you will be extremely useful to the school.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Any other question, please?
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Keshav.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Speak a little loudly, please. Yes.
Yeah, the question is, what I find among students is they are largely dependent on the pedagogy of being instructed. How do we develop a certain level of andragogy where they seek knowledge from the right sources? If you connect it with NEP 2020, where there is some degree of flexibility, I think self-learning also has to come to the fore. How do you feel that we can do this in colleges?
Sir, let me just, in my words, I will repeat what you said so that the understanding of your question is correct on my side. What you are asking is, how do you bring in this concept of self-learning on the part of students in architecture schools?
That's right, sir. Thank
you. Very good. So, because my understanding has to be correct. It's a very good question, and the good news is a lot of things are on the table. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Your point has been very clearly brought out in the discussion of the architecture curriculum. And one of the major points is we should have a suitable place for encouraging self-learning. Correct. And for that purpose, many good schools have already got it. Now other schools are also borrowing the idea. They are introducing the concept of architectural dissertation. Architectural dissertation, but I don't want to name. Maybe it's all right if I name, because no offense. For example, CEPT Ahmedabad has been offering this architectural dissertation for a long time. Architectural dissertation is different from the thesis. Thesis, we all know it is a design thesis. Architectural dissertation is specifically meant for guided self-learning on the part of the student. And I am glad to say that has become a part of the syllabus that is getting framed by the Council of Architecture for the 3-month training program for young teachers. So there is a specific topic on architectural dissertation, guided self-learning. That means the student has to be able to pick up a suitable topic which is quite relevant to the present scenario of architecture and design in this country or elsewhere. Then find out what are the objectives, what does he want to achieve through this study. Then come out with a clear plan of action, how to achieve those objectives, what data has to be collected, how it has to be analyzed, and what conclusions can be there from that study. The purpose of this architectural, and I tell you, this architectural dissertation, now many universities are using it. See, nowadays, there are several universities springing up, private universities. They have got so much flexibility. So I know that architectural dissertation has become a part and parcel of the BR program of the university, simply because whatever you rightly said, self-learning is possible in that entire setup. And the idea is that the student learns by himself. not design. It is not design at all. It is on a special topic of interest to the student, does original work. Now, this is an important point I would like to say here, because that is a bone of contention. See, I don't want to get into that, you are all aware. The problem is, if you say dissertation, write up, etc., people, original work is required, then only it is meaningful. So, in fact, in the syllabus, we are saying original work. That is the underlining point. So, the student, that has to make sense to the school and the student and the guide. It has to be done based on the literature review, area of interest, and in a 4-month period, the student has to complete the dissertation, clearly define the objectives, scope, etc., collect all the data, and then come out with a meaningful conclusion. And the idea also is whether at the end of the dissertation, the student and probably along with the guide will publish a paper out of that original work. So, this is already there on the table, and I would genuinely believe, just like you believe, that this is very much required, because for a long time this has been missing. And the moment you only focus on design and you do not bother about this, what do you call this, rigorous evidence-based learning, something is missing in the learning process. So, that is the simple technique by which this shortcoming, which is in terms of self-learning, whatever is missing, it can easily be introduced. And in fact, I'm glad to say that the Council of Architecture is intending to include that, and I'm happy about it. Have I answered your question, sir?
Thank you, sir. It's nice to hear that the Council of Architecture is coming out with a short course also for 3 months for teachers, and that itself, I think, is a very welcome move, sir.
And I can tell you that this is a part to teach, how to teach. See, this is about pedagogy. So, how to teach architectural dissertation, there will be a resource person, there will be a lot of inputs on that.
That's great to hear, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other question, please? If there are no more questions, now I will hand over to Madam to conclude the session. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful session. Now I call upon Architect Yuvraj, sir, to give a vote of thanks.
Ma'am, we'd like to thank Dr. Anantha Krishna sir for his wonderful speech on the essence of being an architectural teacher. It was really a wonderful presentation and explanation, sir. We thank our principal in charge, Dr. Gayatri Aditya, for proposing and permitting us to conduct this program. We thank our in charge HOD architect Bindu for all the support. We also thank architect Nandita for this event. Finally, on behalf of Nitte School of Architecture, Planning and Design, we thank all the teaching professionals who took part in this program. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you.